Longtime fans of the inhabitants of the Mesozoic era have more than once imagined a perfect coexistence with dinosaurs on Earth. For many, they represent great pets, whereas others see them as a source of food. In this video, we'll talk about what would happen if we were able to resurrect dinosaurs and breed them for food. Watch the video to the end and learn what dinosaur meat would taste like. The population of the Earth is getting bigger and bigger every year. Due to this, there is a need to increase food production and consider new methods for producing so-called natural raw materials. As an alternative, scientists are already considering resurrecting dinosaurs with live animal DNA. So how would scientists breed dinosaurs? How much would such a delicacy cost? And what would it taste like? And what should be expected from such a technological solution? We will tell you next. Modern research by scientists suggests that resurrecting dinosaurs wouldn't be easy. First, they would need to find live DNA. And even if successful, the main work would still lie ahead. Having received the frozen DNA, they would need to extract all the information and place it into an embryo of an identical animal. Birds have the greatest similarity, therefore the potential dinosaur would come from a chicken egg. Okay, we figured out how the first dinosaur would come into being. Let's go on. How would dinosaurs be kept? We know from history and zoology that dinosaurs come in different shapes and sizes. So, depending on its DNA, a small or large individual would have various needs. By the way, it would grow very quickly. A newborn hatchling could weigh just under 4 kilograms, but in just a few months, its weight would increase almost 10 times. As for food, an adult dinosaur would be able to eat up to 450 kilograms of food, which is equivalent to about 18 large cows. As you know, feeding a large animal is quite difficult, but the result, tons of fresh meat, would clearly be worth it. Since we're talking about food and meat, we will figure out what sort of meat we could get from the body of a dinosaur. What would dinosaur meat taste like? Are we seriously thinking about farming dinosaurs? Who knows? Maybe it'll be possible in the future. But for now, let's get some ideas about what the meat of these animals would taste like. Almost every one of us has tasted juicy and tender herbivore meat. So, given that dinosaurs were herbivores, in the future humanity could actually get better quality meat from them, provided that their food, the grass itself, was of high quality, and the animals received sufficient amounts of trace elements. It is important to understand that each species would have its own characteristic taste and particular texture of meat. For example, herbivores and fast-moving individuals would have white meat that tastes like something between chicken and ostrich. Other varieties, such as aquatic, Ichthyosaurus, or Shonisaurus, would have meat with a relatively soft texture and a pronounced flavor of seafood. Predators such as Albertosaurus or Allosaurus would have fairly tough meat, let's say not to everyone's taste. In any case, the taste would be a curiosity and definitely find its enthusiasts. Now the most interesting question. How much would dinosaur meat cost? It is extremely difficult to answer this question exactly, but we can make some approximate calculations. You can start with the fact that keeping a large dinosaur would not be economical, and so it would affect the final cost of the product. If individuals were slaughtered while still young, the cost wouldn't be lower. High demand and the uniqueness of the product would be a clear confirmation of this. Who could afford to buy dinosaur meat? Everything is extremely simple here. Upper middle class people, because the price of 1 kilogram of fresh or frozen meat would start from $1,000 to several $1,000s. I wonder if you'd like to be the first to try dinosaur meat. If so, which one? Herbivore, predatory, aquatic, or flying? What if the dinosaurs hadn't died out 66 million years ago? The most mass extinction in history happened on our planet 66 million years ago. After a collision with a giant asteroid, The planet was shaken by a series of natural disasters, which led to the disappearance of some of the most mysterious and interesting creatures, dinosaurs. Many scientists are trying to make assumptions about the possibility of evolution if this extinction had not happened. It's hard enough to imagine how prehistoric pangolins would change over time in this case. It's even more difficult to understand would take mammals their current place at the top of the food chain and a species like man would appear. The answer to the first question may have been given to the Scottish scientist Dougal Dixon, who published a book in 1988 in which he tried to predict possible options for the evolution of many species of dinosaurs. The author presented the descendants of some living creatures from the age of dinosaurs in a rather peculiar way and gave them interesting names. But all his assumptions have scientifically based arguments. Almost all creatures invented by the Scot have analogs in the modern animal kingdom. The names of these animals are related more to their appearance and manner of behavior. For example, in South America, it would be possible for a small flock of predators to appear, the name of which can be translated into Russian as Tzakazu. The scientist also suggested that a weaver could live on the territory of modern Australia. It was supposed to become a descendant of small theropods, which would switch to nutrition by straining water and catching small mollusks and crustaceans in it. The principle of nutrition would also determine the appearance of this creature. It's likely that the weaver would be like a flamingo. The most interesting animal could be a large predator named Gourmet. He could become a descendant of a Tyrannosaurus or other large theropod. Dougal Dixon suggested that the forelimbs, which T-Rex practically did not use already at the end of the real age of dinosaurs, would disappear completely in the process of evolution. The scientists also suggested that for faster ingestion of prey, the jaws of this creature will become elastic, like modern snakes. Some species of dinosaurs would try to populate the seas and oceans. In the history of the animal world, there are enough examples of such development. The ancestors of modern whales, seals, manatees returned back from land to the seas. It is the truth, the Cretaceous seas were inhabited by quite formidable predators such as giant sharks, saltwater crocodiles, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs, and ichthyosaurs. But it is quite possible that some species of dinosaurs could succeed. Many dinosaur researchers agree that the appearance of flowering plants at the end of the Cretaceous period led to the appearance of small dinosaurs living in trees and feeding on fruit and leaves. If they survived a meteorite fall, they could take up the entire ecological niche, which is occupied by primates now. Therefore, monkeys would be forced to develop in another way or not appear at all. In this case, the appearance of a man, at least as we know it, would be a big question. Of course, raptors that have survived to our times would not resemble their giant ancestors from the age of dinosaurs. Most likely, they would significantly reduce in size and develop new survival mechanisms, adapting to changes in climate, water, and air composition, the appearance of new species of plants and animals. But the fate of mammals in the event of the survival of dinosaurs would be unenviable. The ancestors of the planet's modern hosts lived side by side with dinosaurs for about 166 million years, but were never able to come out from their shadow. Giant raptors died out just 66 million years ago. By evolutionary standards, this is not such a significant time to change the situation in favor of creatures that for a longer time could not displace dinosaurs from any major life niches. But if we assume that the planet and all life on it after the end of the Cretaceous period began to develop in parallel with the remaining dinosaurs in the same way as it happened after their extinction, it can be even assumed that the first people appeared in the same way as in the history we know, but lived simultaneously with the descendants of dinosaurs. Some scientists suggest that the coexistence of real animals on two continents formed after the division of the supercontinent in Gondwana and Laurasia can be considered as a model of mammalian and dinosaur coexistence. These continents diverged at the moment when the first placental mammals began to appear on the planet. But none of them managed to get into Laurasia. At that time, both continents were inhabited by various species of birds, including giant flightless predators. Reptiles and amphibians prospered on Earth. In the Gondwana territory, placental mammals have taken control, and only marsupials remained in Laurasia. The territory of Gondwana included modern Australia and South America. It is known that on these continents, marsupials could not make up serious competition for crocodiles, large monitor lizards, and birds of prey. And in the territories that were part of Laurasia, mammals have risen to the very top of the food pyramid. Based on this data, it may well be assumed that surviving dinosaurs would dominate one continent and lose the evolutionary race on another. It is possible that with the further drift of continental plates, these two worlds would begin to collide in different parts of the planet, and the descendants of dinosaurs would gradually give up their positions. But even now, there is a continent where mammals have not been able to seriously develop. Therefore, surviving dinosaurs could live in Australia and feel quite comfortable there in our time. Given their greater adaptability and more efficient mode of movement, dinosaurs here could greatly squeeze crocodiles and giant monitor lizards.
What if Tyrannosaurus Rex was an overgrown chicken? Since the discovery of the first remains of Tyrannosaurus Rex more than 100 years ago, and until recently, it appeared to most people as a huge, toothy, bipedal lizard. In many ways, this image was created by modern mass culture. But what was the disappointment of scientists who came to the conclusion that the most terrible predator of the age of dinosaurs, as a result, degenerated into an ordinary domestic chicken? In this video, we will talk about the discovery of family relationships between dinosaurs and modern birds, and also find out how close relatives of domestic chickens and theropods are that of the Tyrannosaurid family. Viewers who subscribe to our channel will be the first to know about the appearance of new videos about the life of dinosaurs and other living organisms that inhabited our Earth at different times. Our subscribers can express their opinion about the work of the creators of the channel in the comments and support us with likes. The first finds of Tyrannosaurus Rex bones were made by the American paleontologist Barnum Brown in 1902. These were scattered bones, from which scientists were able to collect only the hind limbs. But in 1908, a skeleton fell into the hands of researchers, almost 50% preserved. The main thing in this find was a well-preserved skull. Impressed by its jaws and teeth, scientists named this giant the Tyrant King of Lizards. According to modern estimates, Tyrannosaurus could reach 12 to 13 meters in length and have a height of up to 4 meters. They lived on the territory of the modern USA and Canada, and also, possibly, lived in the Asian part of Russia and neighboring states. The T-Rex weighed about 6 to 9 tons. Such dimensions, combined with huge claws and teeth, powerful hind limbs, and a large head and strong neck, allowed scientists to put this monster at the top of the food pyramid of the late Cretaceous period. For many years, T-Rex became the personification of the greatness and bloodthirstiness of dinosaurs. But after the appearance of data of the presence of feather cover in dinosaurs, many looked at this monster at a slightly different angle. Although there is no reliable data on the presence of feathers on the Tyrannosaurus itself, many facts have appeared that have proved its undoubted relationship with modern chickens. One of the most important finds proving the origin of birds from dinosaurs is without a doubt such a mysterious creature as Archaeopteryx. It has features that are characteristic of both types of creatures and is considered a transitional form between them. In the modern classification, the Archaeopteryx family belongs to the class birds, but this creature differs very much from modern representatives of this class. Archaeopteryx lived on the territory of the European continent about 150 million years ago in the Jurassic period. Its weight was about 1 kilogram, and the dimensions could reach 50 to 55 centimeters. Scientists suggest he was a predator and may have been able to fly. In this, he was helped by almost full-fledged wings covered with feathers. But at the same time, his jaws were equipped with sharp teeth and did not at all resemble a beak. He also possessed such signs of a dinosaur as claws on the forelimb and a bony tail. Currently, science knows of 12 samples of the fossilized remains of this creature. Their study made it possible to draw conclusions about the presence of feathers in Archaeopteryx, not only in the wings, the tip of the tail, and metatarsal bones, but also on the legs, neck, and other parts of the body. At the time of the discovery of the first remains of Archaeopteryx, Darwin's theory was not yet recognized by most scientists as correct, and Archaeopteryx was classified as a bird. The British scientist Thomas Henry Huxley tried to substantiate the version of the origin of birds from dinosaurs, but it was not accepted by official science. Therefore, the T-Rex remained in the public mind for a long time as a huge carnivorous lizard, and science did not connect it with modern birds in any way. The next step in recognizing the relationship of dinosaurs with birds happened almost 100 years after the discovery of Archaeopteryx. In the 60s of the 20th century, during excavations in southern Montana, paleontologist John Ostrom discovered a dinosaur species previously unknown to science, called Deinonychus, which means terrible claw. Brown was first to describe the remains of this dinosaur more than 50 years ago, but then he mistook them for the bones of a completely different dinosaur. Ostrom compared these specimens with new finds and classified them as a new species from the Tyrannosaurid family. Deinonychus, like the T-Rex, was a predator, but at a much smaller size. With a growth of just over 1 meter and a body length of about 3 meters, Deinonychus weighed no more than 70 kilograms. But the study of the preserved bones of this relative of the Tyrannosaurus allowed us to assume that he had not only the presence of a feather cover, but also for the first time to talk about the warm bloodedness of dinosaurs. In addition, Deinonychus had a fairly large brain. These discoveries have completely changed scientists' understanding of the appearance and habits of theropods in particular, and dinosaurs in general. In light of the discovery of new facts, John Ostrom re-examined the remains of Archaeopteryx and found a large number of similarities with the newly discovered species of dinosaurs. One of the most important evidence of the relationship was the same structure of the wrist. The number and shape of Deinonychus's wrist bones allowed it to fold its forelimbs in the same way as birds do. Also, along the spine of the Deinonychus were found openings characteristic of the respiratory system of birds. These are the air sacs. After the discovery in the 90s of the last century of the almost complete skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, which received its name, Sue, the similarity of the structure and shape of its bones with the bird's skeleton became undeniable. But the presence of feathers was not confirmed even then. There are several opinions regarding the plumage of the T-Rex. Since he was much larger than his feathered relatives, he probably did not need additional insulation. A similar phenomenon can be observed in modern mammals. While some small animals almost always have fur, the largest creatures, like elephants and rhinos, remain naked. So in the course of evolution, they solved their problems with thermoregulation. Maybe a feathered Tyrannosaurus simply could not survive in those conditions, suffering from regular heat strokes. There is also an opinion that tyrannosaurs were covered with a layer of protofeathers similar to the down of modern birds. Another evidence of the origin of birds from theropods, scientists call similar behavior in terms of caring for offspring. It has already been proven that many small bipedal lizard dinosaurs, such as Oviraptor, incubated their eggs by warming them with the warmth of their bodies. Here, plumage could also play a role. In addition, the shape of the found eggs of many theropods is very similar to birds. Of course, the oblong shape of the eggs is more convenient for their preservation. But other egg-laying creatures in the course of evolution did not come to just such a form. Such a giant as a Tyrannosaurus, of course, was hardly engaged in incubation of eggs. For this procedure, his body certainly was not adapted, despite all the similarities with birds. It is believed that they could build special nests, creating an optimal microclimate in them, as another relative of the birds, crocodiles, does. And in 2001, paleontologist Mary Scheitzer examined a piece of Tyrannosaurus Rex femur under a microscope and found a truly amazing thing. Inside the bone, remains of soft tissues are preserved, similar to substances that are formed in modern birds only in the process of gestation. Such bones are called midullar. Their presence in the T-Rex was another fact that confirmed the hypothesis of Thomas Huxley, expressed in the second half of the 19th century. Birds are descendants of theropods. Of course, to say that our domestic chickens are the same as tyrannosaurs that terrified the entire planet many millions of years ago is fundamentally wrong. But modern science has a sufficient number of facts that speak of their undoubted relationship. We can only assume that if dinosaurs had not died out 66 million years ago, then in the course of evolution, the descendants of the formidable Tyrannosaurus Rex would now look like fluffy chickens, maybe only a little larger.
What if we brought the dinosaurs back to our time? Dinosaurs. These animals dominated Earth for more than 140 million years, and the reason for the decline of their era was the collision of Earth with a huge asteroid. But today, we'll not talk about dinosaurs, but we will tell you about one huge desire of all paleontologists. Man has long been tormented by the question, is it possible to return these long-gone reptiles from the realm of the dead? Is Jurassic Park possible in modern times? And if we could do it after all, would we really like it? But before answering these questions, be sure to subscribe to our Dinosaur Age channel. Rate our videos and write comments. Your opinion is very important to us. And now, we continue. The basic concept of dinosaur resurrection starts with a mosquito filled with DNA that has been stored in amber for tens of millions of years. But is it scientifically possible, or is it all fiction? Amber is a wood resin produced by some coniferous trees which, over thousands of years, has become petrified due to its high pressure and temperature. For years, the resin has hardened, thereby forming a gem that people have used as jewelry for millennia. Dinosaur DNA, which could have been kept inside blood-sucking insects buried in amber, is of great interest, since DNA contains genetic information on the growth and functioning of all living beings on the planet. But can ancient DNA extracted from amber be a genetic material to recreate extinct animals? As modern scientists say, we have mosquitoes and other biting parasites, such as flies and fleas, that have survived since dinosaurs in amber. But the fact is that when a sample is found in amber, it consists only of husks and does not contain soft tissue. So the blood of mosquitoes in amber will not be preserved, and as a result, DNA is simply impossible to extract. Based on this, it can be concluded that Jurassic Park cannot be created in the way that the famous science fiction writer Michael Crichton wrote. But the search for dinosaur DNA doesn't end there. The remains of blood were still found inside ancient insects, but not in amber. A few years ago, an article was published about a mosquito from the Eocene. That's about 45 million years ago. That is, about 20 million years after the dinosaurs became extinct. The mosquito is well preserved in the bottom sediments of the lake and had a red pigment in the belly. When the scientists tested this pigment chemically, they found hemoglobin-derived porphyrins. As known, These decay products of hemoglobin, a red protein, are responsible for saturating the body's tissues with oxygen in the body of almost all vertebrates. And the idea that one day we can find a mosquito or a biting fly from the Mesozoic with some parts of the blood still held is not so fantastic. But that's not all. Even if paleontologists manage to find preserved blood, it does not mean that scientists will find DNA in it. Thus, even if dinosaur blood was found inside an ancient insect, the ability to recreate a reptile from it is not guaranteed. In 2015, paleontology scientists have found within the fossil bone of a Cretaceous dinosaur what they interpreted as erythrocyte, also known as red blood cells. These blood cells contain nuclei that mammals do not have, so it's been suggested that they are red reptile blood cells. Scientists compared them to birds' red blood cells, and it showed some morphological similarities. Using modern equipment, scientists tried to find at least some trace of DNA in this material, but could not detect anything. The result of this work is, even if we manage to find blood or soft tissue, it is far from a fact that we will find DNA. Ancient DNA has already been extracted from permafrost and has also been found in fossils of bones or other parts of the body that are not yet fully fossilized. But DNA is vulnerable and degrades very quickly. Sunlight also has a negative effect, and water significantly accelerates the deterioration of DNA. To work with DNA, strictly controlled conditions must be maintained. Currently, the oldest DNA found is about 1 million years old, although it may be younger because the exact age is still very difficult to determine. And to get to the dinosaurs, you need to find DNA 65 times older. Now, let's imagine if dinosaur DNA has been discovered, and what happens next? If you work at Jurassic Park's Genetic Engineering Center, you just combine it with the frog's DNA and recreate the extinct reptile. After all, in the film Jurassic Park, they say that they found fragmented DNA. They determined where the holes were and filled them with frog DNA. But the problem is that we can't know where the holes are if we don't have the whole genome. A genome is a complete set of DNA from a living being. Without the full genome, it would be impossible to tell which parts of DNA were found, and therefore, it would be impossible to fill in the gaps to build an entire animal. But if we had the whole genome and we were going to fill the holes with fragments, then we definitely wouldn't do this with frogs, because frogs are amphibians. If we were going to do this, we would use the DNA of birds, because birds are direct descendants of dinosaurs. Well, or they would do it with the DNA of a crocodile, because they have a common ancestor with dinosaurs. So, can we clone dinosaurs after all? Dinosaurs went extinct about 66 million years ago, and with so much time gone, it's unlikely that it'll be possible to find dinosaur DNA today. But some paleontologist scientists refuse to stop its search, hoping to get lucky. If we take into account all the above information, then we can conclude that the cloning of the dinosaur is no longer an urgent topic, but there is an alternative way to recreate extinct animals, such as redesigning them. To do this, you need to start with a living animal and return to ancient reptiles, trying to reverse at least 66 million years of evolution. For example, we could take a chicken and genetically engineer it so it has teeth or a long tail. But even if we do, it will no longer be a dinosaur because it was reconstructed. Beyond that, recreating dinosaurs or any other extinct animal can cause some ethical dilemmas. An animal that went extinct naturally 150 million years ago knows nothing about the world. How will it exist now? What will it eat if the grass in its era did not already exist? What is its function in this habitat? The attempt to resurrect dinosaurs presents many scientific and ethical challenges, and creating a creature that can be put on public display in zoos or amusement parks like Jurassic World is likely not the answer to these questions. So, at the moment, the right decision will be to leave the dinosaurs in the past. and the use of genetic engineering to return extinct animals can be considered necessary under other circumstances, such as the return of those animal species that have become extinct due to human actions on the planet. So, if someone decides to return an extinct wandering pigeon that lived in the modern ecosystem and fully fit into it, then this action would be justified by a good goal. What if humans ended up in the age of dinosaurs? Human time travel is a typical plot for fantasy novels and movies. The heroes of these works, however, usually find themselves in an era in which some semblance of human society exists. We have many examples in fiction of the adventures of our present-day people in the time of Wild West, the Middle Ages, and even the Stone Age. But not every author dares to take his character hundreds of millions of years back in time, to the age of dinosaurs. It's difficult enough to properly describe the nature and living conditions of anyone who somehow incomprehensibly got thrown into a world inhabited by giant reptiles. After all, apart from dinosaurs and other animals, people have to deal with a huge number of nuanced inconveniences, ranging from a different atmospheric composition of climatic conditions and the absence of edible fruits and familiar plants. Learn more about the real flora and fauna of the age of dinosaurs in other videos on our channel. By subscribing, you can be the first to hear about new videos. With the help of likes and comments, any viewer can share their opinions of topics covered in our videos. More often than not, fiction writers place dinosaurs in the conditions that humans are accustomed to. This usually takes place in a remote corner of an unexplored continent, like Conan Doyle in The Lost World, or a small island in the middle of the ocean, like Spielberg in Jurassic Park. But in these cases, there was only one serious danger to humans: the dinosaurs themselves. Not only could these reptiles end up hostile should one intentionally or accidentally end up in the age of dinosaurs, but the entire environment would be alien to human beings. Most likely, an accidental hitchhiker wouldn't even last a few days alone amidst dinosaurs. But a trained group of specialists could not only survive in those alien conditions, but also exist safely in this new world. The first problem to be solved concerning the preparation of such an expedition would be the differing gas composition of the planet's atmosphere. Particularly, during the apex of the dinosaurs' domination, there was significantly less oxygen in the air. It is known that a lack of oxygen can cause a diverse set of consequences. Therefore, the best solution a scientific expedition could take is to bring their own oxygen tanks, with a mixture of gases more familiar to human lungs. Living in workspaces, in this case, would have to be made airtight and make use of appropriate equipment. It's possible the human body's reaction to the dinosaur's atmosphere wouldn't be so threatening, but it's better to be sure. The lack of familiar food won't be any less of a problem. In the age of dinosaurs, not only were there no fruits that humans would be accustomed to, but the trees on which this fruit might hang were absent as well. Naturally, we could try catching food by hunting or fishing, but the ancestors of fish that were evolving during that time were much larger than their present-day descendants and didn't mind feasting on smaller animals that might wander into the water. In the event of a prearranged expedition, the problem of food might not be so pronounced. Firstly, any such group would be provided a sufficient amount of food. There would be a balanced menu, allowing explorers to engage in specific work rather than fret constantly over food. There would also be teams of hunters and fishermen equipment with the knowledge of pursuing local animals without putting their own lives at risk. Undoubtedly, when preparing for long expeditions into the age of dinosaurs, people should bring with them not only a supply of provisions, but also seeds from a modern agricultural produce. Thus, within a few years, a small colony would be able to support itself independently. A lot will also depend on the place where the supposed time traveler might end up. Some scientists believe that the most dangerous place on Earth during the era of dinosaurs was the area now referred to as the modern Sahara Desert. It's difficult regardless for an untrained human to survive in any wilderness alone. There's no need to travel anywhere in time to demonstrate that. The modern taiga, the African savanna, or the circumpolar regions are no less dangerous, and the prospect of being eaten by a lion or a bear is no different than dying at the teeth of a Tyrannosaurus. In various parts of the modern Earth, one might also face problems with the climate, finding water and nourishment. Surviving in the Sahara now without equipment is almost impossible. despite its lack of tropical forests inhabited by giant lizards. Finally, let's head to the planetary masters of that era, the dinosaurs. When discussing time traveling to the age of dinosaurs, many people merely imagine adventures to the theme of Jurassic Park movies, where a T-Rex or a Spinosaurus lurks behind every tree. But the laws of nature are unchanging, and they apply just as much then as they do now. The larger the predator, the larger its hunting territory. In the case of large theropods, their territory probably occupied more than an entire square kilometer. Therefore, the probability of encountering the king of beasts as a human being who is of no interest to him as prey wouldn't be very high. As we've already discussed, human beings just wouldn't have been considered food by these large predators. The objective in their hunts was large herbivores. Humans would have needed to handle some animal in their own weight class. Don't think that all reptiles of the time were the size of a truck. Giant dinosaurs were thought to make up only 5% of the total population. The forests in the age of dinosaurs were inhabited by a large number of small lizards. Many of them would have posed little danger to humans. Their main concern was not becoming someone else's dinner, nor would they lively have perceived humans as a threat. The hunting grounds of the modern armored tiger may exceed 100 square kilometers. The size depends on the amount of prey in the area. Most likely, the Tyrannosaurus and other large predators of the age of dinosaurs occupied a comparable area in which to hunt. There's a good chance that a single man who might end up in that era wouldn't encounter a single T-Rex in his vicinity. Thus, if the issue of reduced oxygen content and the lack of habitual food were solved, it would be quite possible for humans to live alongside the dinosaurs, and a well-armed and prepared group could do it with relative comfort. With weapons, equipment, transport, and building materials, even in the age of dinosaurs, a human could end up the master of the planet. A single person, however, even the most trained individual, would be unlikely to play Robinson for long. Though this applies not only in time travel fantasies, but also in getting through extreme conditions on an otherwise habitable and fairly safe Earth in our present time. Surviving alone in the desert of the taiga, the jungle, or the far north is a difficult and dangerous undertaking even without dinosaurs around. What if you had lived during the Devonian period? Many of us ponder the notion, if humans had appeared on Earth earlier in its history, would they have been able to survive these other epochs? In different geological periods of our planet's life, living conditions were quite unlike what modern humans are accustomed to. Continents were in different locations, there were disparate weather conditions, and diverse flora and fauna. Even the composition of the water and air were distinct from the current day. We've already discussed the possible human survival during the age of dinosaurs. This time, we're taking you back to an even earlier time, the Devonian period. If you are interested in the history of life on Earth and want to be the first to hear about new video releases, we recommend you subscribe to our channel. Here you can learn about scientific theories related to various stages of the planet's formation. Also, our subscribers are able to share their opinions in the comments, and with the help of likes, you can express your opinion of our production to the creators of this channel. And now, the Devonian period, which is also called the Age of Fish. It spanned 56 million years. During this time, the landscape of living organisms underwent development. The underwater world, though, boasts the greatest diversity of animal and plant species. No other era has seen so many variants of fish, arthropods, mollusks, sponges, corals, and polyps. The conditions at the beginning of this era were very different from the conditions at its end. Let's try and compare these time periods and figure out where humans would fit most comfortably. To this, we will access the geological, climatological, atmospheric, and even culinary aspects of their existence. Habitat. The geology of the Devonian period is characterized by intense volcanic activity and constant movement of tectonic plates. At the onset of this period, there were two large continents that made up the land, Laurasia and Gondwana. Both of them were located in the southern hemisphere. By the end of the period, they had merged into one supercontinent, Pangaea. Due to the constant movement of the Earth's crust, new mountains and islands were formed. In particular, the present-day British Isles and the North American Appalachian Mountains were formed during this time. All these shifts and collisions were accompanied by regular volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, and earthquakes. After the final unification of continents, however, this activity subsided. It turns out that from the point of view of geology, people would have lived more comfortably in the central part of Eurasia or Gondwana. Moving to the coast would be more worthwhile only after the final unification of continents. As you will see, all life was concentrated near the coast in the early Devonian period. The central lands of the early Devonian period were a barren wasteland. Flora and fauna. By the end of the Devonian period, the entire land surface was covered with tropical forests. The trees growing during this era were of enormous size. As far as structure is concerned, they were more similar to ferns, and they didn't reproduce through seeds but used spores. This trait didn't prevent them from growing several dozen meters in height. There have been discoveries of remains of these giant ferns with trunks up to 30 meters or 98 feet. This meant that humans in the Devonian period would have been well supplied with fuel and building material. It is unlikely, however, that plants would have provided the necessities of life. During this period, plants had yet to bear harvestable fruit. There wouldn't have been any point in farming either, unless these portions of plants were to simply serve as seasoning or alternative sources of vitamins. Foraging for food by hunting during the Devonian period would have been difficult as well. The fact is that the land was inhabited for the most part by insects and arthropods. It is among the arthropods that the most dangerous of that era's terrestrial predators could be found. Not only were crustaceans the size of modern dogs, but they possessed a serious weapon in the form of powerful claws. Scientists also believe that the Devonian porcupines were poisonous. It's likely that the stinger located at the end of their tail performed similarly to modern scorpions. That said, it's not entirely clear how tasty and nutritious such prey would have been. On the other hand, scorpions are considered a delicacy in some Southeast Asian countries. But it was at this moment that fish began to explore the land. During this process of development, they first became amphibians, and then finally fully fledged reptiles. These reptiles had not yet begun to grow to the size of dinosaurs. Thus, by the end of the Devonian period, humans would have had the opportunity to eat something akin to the modern monitor lizard. The collection of mollusks and trilobites in tidal zones of the planet's seas and oceans could have substantially supplemented the human palate. Mollusks of this period did not differ much from their modern counterparts in terms of appearance and lifestyle. Thus, their meat should have had the same consistency and nutritional value. And the extinct trilobites probably tasted like crab. The most efficient way to supply food in the Devonian period would have been fishing. The seas and oceans of this era were home to a vast array of armored and cartilaginous fish of all variations and sizes. By learning how to catch them, one could say goodbye to hunger forever. But here, it was important to avoid becoming prey yourself. The Devonian period's scariest predators lived beneath the waves. The enormous and armored Dunkleosteus, or 10-foot clam Camarasaurus, could have easily mistaken a man in the water or a boatload of fishermen as prey. If such an encounter were to take place, there would be little chance of survival. And that's not even touching the huge number of prehistoric sharks and rays, which usually ended up being food themselves for the aforementioned monsters. Climate. Throughout the Devonian period, the climate on our planet was hot and humid. The average temperature at the beginning of the period hovered around 30 degrees Celsius, or 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and dropped to about 25 degrees Celsius, 77 degrees Fahrenheit, towards the period's end. And nowadays, we find locations on the Earth with similar climates. People have been living in these areas for a long time and haven't run into serious problems. However, by the end of the Devonian period was brought on by a consequence of sharp cooling. Here, the onset of another ice age could threaten human survival. Many scientists agree that this was the reason for the extinction of almost every living creature of the Devonian period. Atmosphere. Another reason for the extinction of many species may have been a change in the composition of the breathable atmosphere. At the beginning of the period, there was a large amount of carbon dioxide in the air. This created a greenhouse effect and was the reason behind such a hot climate. But the landfall of plants led to an increase in the release of oxygen into the air. The ocean was already being taken over by green algae, which was producing an enormous amount of oxygen as well. Many organisms were unable to adapt quickly enough to the changing gas compositions in the air and water. At the end of the Devonian period, oceans were virtually barren. The Ice Age. Regardless, the decrease in the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere led to a subsequent decrease in the greenhouse effect. The climate on the planet became drastically cooler. This resulted in the onset of another ice age. And there's no telling whether people caught up in the Devonian period would have been able to adapt. Even now, there were places on the Earth's surface where it's impossible for humans to survive without proper knowledge and skills. An ill-equipped person can die from exposure, lack of water and food, and attacks by wild animals. This can happen in the circumpolar regions, in deserts, tropical jungles, and other underdeveloped regions. In the Devonian period, people would have faced a world completely unlike our own, with its own laws and rules. Therefore, the following conclusions can be drawn from the aforementioned information. Theoretically, humans could have survived in the Devonian period. However, their survival would have depended upon the exact time and place they inhabited. Training and skills would have been of utmost importance.
What if we have to rebuild human society from the ground up? Their versions of the end of the world are predicted both in the religious texts of different peoples and confessions, and in world art culture in the forms of films, computer games, and books. And each of these works expresses different views on how people will cope with the consequences of the apocalypse and restore civilization. Today, we will try to guess how far humanity will roll back in its technological development and how difficult it'll be for people to restore the lost knowledge. Viewers who are interested in the development of life on our planet in different periods of its existence and new scientific achievements in this area, we suggest subscribing to our channel. This will allow you to be the first to know about the releases of new videos and leave your comments underneath them. You can also help promote the channel with likes. The cause of the end of the world can be events such as global natural disasters, pandemics of various deadly diseases, or nuclear war. All these events are capable of taking the lives of most of the planet's population and destroying the existing system of production of the necessary goods. But in this video, we're not going to consider the ways to survive in the radioactive wastelands among gangs of marauders or fight hordes of zombies eager to eat everyone they can reach. Let's try to simulate a situation when, as a result of the end of the world, there were suddenly practically no people left on Earth. For example, suddenly all people were infected with a deadly virus, and most of them could not cope with the disease. At the same time, before their death, all of them carefully drowned out all nuclear reactors, stopped transport, drained water at the dams of hydroelectric power plants, parked all vehicles, landed all planes, stopped trains, turned off water, gas, and electricity. That is, the surviving handful of people got a clean and almost safe planet, not affected by radiation, acid rain, hurricanes, tsunamis, and earthquakes, with a familiar climate and other living conditions. Often, there's an opinion that in such case, humanity will roll back to the Stone Age. But it would be more like the Middle Ages. But even in the Middle Ages, throughout their entire length, people lived in different ways. But where we get to live, in the Dark Ages or in the Renaissance, depends on a large number of factors. The survival of mankind and the speed of its return to the modern level depends on many factors. This is the quantitative and qualitative composition of the groups of survivors and the ability of relevant materials, such as information, as well as the social system that people will eventually come to in the first days after the death of the world. Already in the 18th century, scientists began to think about a way to preserve technological and cultural knowledge in the event of the collapse of civilization. In 1751, Denis Diderot published his encyclopedia. In this colossal work, he tried to fit the maximum amount of knowledge, fearing that the then European civilization would disappear, like it happened with the Roman Empire or ancient Egypt. These fears of one of the greatest educators were well-founded. Archaeology tells us that many of these technologies used by ancient Romans were lost in the Middle Ages, and subsequently, people had to reinvent many things. A completely different approach to the restoration of society was proposed in the 20th century by the American psychist Richard Feynman. His theory was that people should receive from previous generations only on the basis from which all other specific data can be derived anew. The scientists believed that this basis can serve as a single phrase. All things are made up of atoms, the smallest particles in constant motion, attracted to each other when there is a small distance between them, but mutually repelling when they are brought closer. It's interesting to think how long it would take for a person who has descended to the level of almost a caveman in his development to be able to unleash this postulate, at least for obtaining the first meals and making tools from them. Probably, civilization will recover faster if people are given a set of simpler and more effective tips. Like the old joke goes, that the only book you need to take with you to a desert island is a textbook on agriculture. And that sounds pretty appropriate. Therefore, not so long ago, science journalist Lewis Dartnell published the book Civilization from Scratch: What You Need to Know to Be Able to Survive After a Global Catastrophe. Although this book also contains a large number of practical tips and recommendations for surviving in a post-apocalyptic environment, this is not the main idea of the author. He says that when writing the book, he tried to make sure that after reading it, an inquisitive person could begin his development, avoiding the mistakes made along the way made by our civilization. Dartnell wants people to get on the right track right away and get where they want to go as soon as possible. But most likely, even with the ideal scenario of the end of the world that was planned at the beginning of the video, it will be very difficult for the surviving people to follow at least some kind of plan. So, back to the first question asked earlier. How many people are needed to restore the human population? Some conditional Adam and Eve will obviously not be enough to obtain the entire diversity of the modern human population. If only a single man and a single woman remain alive, then people will eventually degenerate rather than regain their lost positions. Scientists have determined that among the ancestors of all the tribes that settled on the islands of the Pacific Ocean on the way from Asia to Australia, there were about 70 women capable of childbearing. Accordingly, if a group of people of several hundred people survived, then humanity may have a second chance. It will also be important who these people were before the end of the world. If among them there are a sufficient number of people adapted to work, able to cultivate the land or hunt, then such a group will be able to provide themselves with housing and food. If there are surviving doctors, engineers, or teachers in the group, people will have access to certain technologies. But the main thing is that they should be able to establish a system for transferring this knowledge to future generations. With a high probability, these people will not live in large cities, but will settle in rural areas. At first, they may return to foraging through hunting and gathering. Moreover, at first, the collectors will often visit ruins of dying cities. But gradually, nature will completely absorb and destroy buildings, roads, and bridges. As in ancient times, rivers will become the main trade routes. Along with their shores, the human world will be recreated. When recreating agricultural technologies, humanity will face serious problems. The fact is that most modern plants that are grown on an industrial scale are the result of a long selection and cultivation of the necessary qualities. Without proper fertilizers and proper care, they will either not be able to provide the desired yield or simply die, and people will die after that. Of course, some simple technologies like a windmill or a water wheel can be restored fairly quickly. With minimal knowledge of mechanics and electrical engineering, wind generators can be created and people will be provided with electricity to some extent. But such a familiar thing as an incandescent lamp cannot be assembled without an appropriate level of development of science and technology. After the depletion of all fuel reserves, which also loses quality over time, you will again have to switch to horses. Making even the simplest rubber products on your own will also be very difficult. Synthetic fabrics will disappear. Therefore, after some time, wool will become the main raw material for the production of clothing. Shoes will again be made only of leather, or even return to the use of wooden shoes or bast shoes. The only resource to which people will have practically no problem is metal. Even with constant corrosion and destruction, the supply of metal objects that mankind now uses will far exceed the needs of a handful of surviving people. For its processing, it will not be necessary to develop mines or smelt ore. True, this may adversely affect the preservation of the remnants of knowledge in geology and metallurgy. But knowing the nature of people, another scenario of life after the end of the world is more likely. It is he who underlies most films, books, and computer games. The surviving people will unite in small tribes and will kill each other for the meager remnants of resources. And with each dead person, a piece of knowledge that could help in the restoration of our society will leave the world. Thanks to everyone who watched the video to the end. You can learn more about the possible options and expected dates for the end of the world, as well as other global catastrophes of the past from other materials posted on the Dinosaur Age channel.